Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on the Chess Miniatures channel. Today I'm bringing you a game from the recent Ibero-American Cup, which was played in Linares in Spain this week, and which finished actually this morning with an outstanding win by Spanish Grandmaster Alan Pichot, formerly from Argentina, who finished the tournament with 7.5 out of 9. With another very important and very outstanding performance after coming back from the Olympiad a few days ago. But as you all know, this channel is dedicated to miniature games that finish under 25 moves, and I'm bringing you one of the best miniature games of the tournament, a very instructive game played between international master from Argentina, Marcelo Panelo, with a rating of around 2400, and Spanish woman FIDE master, Ehartse Buiza Prieto, who's rated around 2100. Let's see the game, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed it a lot when I saw it during the tournament. So Panelo starts with d4, and after a few moves we have the famous London system, which is tremendously popular nowadays. Black has different ways to play against the London system, but Ehartse plays one of the main defenses with e6, and personally I generally try to go for active moves like c5 in this position, or occasionally I've tried out bishop to d6. Ehartse plays a very solid move, bishop to e7, safe and solid. Panelo plays bishop to d3, b6, knight b d2. Now, in these positions, sometimes it's interesting to try and exchange off the light square bishops with some ideas based on bishop to a6. Always a bit risky because our knights will be displaced on the side of the board. But then again, the bishop on d3 is very active, and as we'll see in the game, can attack black's king side. So definitely bishop to a6, something to be considered. Buiza played bishop to b7, which is also okay. Knight to e5, castle, c3, knight b d7. Now we have a standard position in the London system. White has played his bishop on f4, the triangle of pawns, a strong knight on e5. And basically the idea of this scheme, this way of playing, is to try and hop over to the queen side, the king side with the queen, and go for a king side attack. That's what Panelo does. A nice move, queen to f3. Aggressive move with the queen. Buiza plays c5. I think that's quite reasonable. Rook to d1, an interesting move. At some point, if a knight hops into e4, after an exchange of pawns and pieces, the rook could hit the queen on c7. It's a long shot, but rook to d1 is an interesting move. Notice how white is refraining from castling, because at some point, if the attack develops, he may want to play h4 and use the rook for the attack. So for the moment, Panelo decides not to castle. I think that's very sensible. Now, in this position, Ehartse played rook to e8. I'm not a fan of this move. I do understand she wants to transfer her knight to f8 to defend the king side. That is quite sensible. But maybe it was time to play a5 and try and exchange off the bishop with bishop to a6. At least the computer suggests this would probably be a better chance for black. In any case, she played rook to e8, queen to h3, knight to f8, protecting the pawn, and knight d to f3, maybe threatening knight to g5. Now this is a key moment of the game, because up to now I think Ehartse played very well. She has a safe and solid position, slightly worse just because of the small pressure on the king side, but nothing to fear really. And now she plays what I consider to be a weak move. Normally when white plays knight to f3, black immediately wants to play knight to e4. This is a key move in the variation. blocking the bishop to the pawn. Now, I suspect that Llada didn't play this move because she was certainly worried about some tactics with pawn takes pawn, followed by bishop takes knight. But of course, if pawn takes pawn, she can recapture with the knight in this position. That's the first thing she can do. And also, if white captures first on e4, and now plays d to h5, okay, so this is also already a tricky position, but black does have some moves here. He could consider even sacrificing the queen, although that would be a long shot, but he has other moves such as queen to c8, and the position's opened up, the knight's under attack. He should have sufficient counterplay here. She should have sufficient counterplay. In any case, she played c4, which I think is probably a mistake, because Panelo drops back the bishop, keeps the attack on the king side, but now we've lost all options of playing actively in the center. Even so, knight to e4 again was probably the best move. Not so strong as before, but still the best move. Llada played knight 6 to d7, and now this is another mistake. And white starts to increase the attack. Queen to h5, attacking the f7 pawn. The computer suggests that maybe black can defend with g6 and bishop to f6, trying to drop back to g7. Maybe this was a possibility. I'm sure white would try and go for h4, h5 at some moment now. In any case, Llada played knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and knight to g6. And now here comes the second wave of the attack. h4, a very strong move. Threatened to bring in the rook to the attack with rook to h3 and g3. Of course, the pawn can't be captured because something like knight takes h4 would lose to queen takes a7, bishop to h4 would lose to g3, and now the rook and the queen attack the h7 pawn. So Buiza plays bishop to d6, at some point trying to exchange off the knight, rook to h3, take, and knight to f8. This is the final losing move. The engine suggests to play now b5, and although white still has a very strong attack, the final thrust still has to come. I think that after queen to b6 or queen to c7, white would drop back with the queen, somehow trying to get in h5, h6, and continue the attack. But it's still tricky. There's still work to be done. She played knight f8, and this is a mistake because now a bolts from the blue. Panelo changes directions with the bishop and goes to a4, hitting the rook, which has no safe square because rook to e7 will lose to bishop to g5 with a pin. So Buiza plays rook to knight to d7, and now rook to g3, and white is actually threatening, among other attacking ideas, to sacrifice the rook on g7. So she's in big trouble now, in big trouble. She tries a6, angling for b5, and now white had a wonderful way to win the game. He could have played bishop takes d7 instead of bishop to g5, which was the move. Also good. But bishop takes d7, queen takes, and now sacrifice of the rook, a check with the queen, and now wherever black goes, she loses. For example, king h8, we check, and then we go in for the mate with queen to g7. If she goes onto the queen side, we block the escape route with queen to f6, and then we push the bishop to g5, and there's no way of escaping from the mate on h8. So this was a really nice way to finish off the game. However, Panelo plays bishop to g5, which is also very good. Queen to c7, capture on d7, and the game finished with bishop to f6, and there's no way to stop the mate on g7. A very nice miniature game. I think it's an excellent one to start off the channel. 23 moves. No really obvious error by black. This was not an opening blunder. There was no tactical opening trick or trap. It was more white pushing, and black not finding the best defenses. I think it's a good way to start off the channel. A nice attack. You can learn a lot from the way Panelo played the attack on the king side. Hopefully you can put the London attack in your repertoire and start winning a lot of games. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you wish to, and give us a like and share with your friends. See you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back to another analysis video on the channel. On the agenda tonight we have a very interesting miniature game between Alexander Sharikov from Russia and, playing with the black pieces, Alexei Goganov, also from Russia, a strong seasoned grandmaster. Now this game was played in the Chigrin Memorial in 2024. I'm bringing you recent games that have been played during this year. At some point I might bring you some classic games as well, some classic miniatures. There are several and very nice ones. But for the moment we're focusing on recent games, on the games which have been played in the last few months. I'm bringing you a game today with the infamous, I'd say already, Jobaba London opening or system. So we'll get to know a bit more about this system. A different variation that was played the other day in the Sokolov game, which I saw got quite a bit of traction. So I assume there are a lot of fans out there that play the Jobaba London with white. At the time you're viewing this video, I'm probably flying over Dubai on my way towards Singapore. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'll be there for the next month working with FIDE on the media side of the Dingliden Gukesh World Championship. I already published my preview. I'll link it below in the commentary just in case you want to check that out. So happily, if this is the last video you see of me, then check out the airlines. Something weird might have happened. But anyway, I'm recording this still at home, but when it's published, which will be tomorrow, I'll be on my way to Singapore. If any of you out there are from Singapore and will be attending either the tournaments or the Open International, please say hello. I'd be happy to meet any of you guys out there and chat, and you can tell me what you like about the channel, what you don't like, and that way I can keep improving. Of course, if anyone wants to leave below a message of a commentary, don't hesitate to do that, and also click the subscribe button, and that way you won't miss any of my videos of the Singapore match. Let's get into the game. So Sharikov, as you can see, I don't have a photo of Sharikov, unfortunately. He is a 2040 rated player, which basically means he's in the area of a very strong club player, playing international tournaments, probably with more than 2,000 rated FIDE. For those of you who don't follow much the FIDE rated, you can add 200 or 300 points to get an idea of his online rating. So he's probably rated around 2,300 on Livshitz or chess.com. Goganov, as I said before, a seasoned grandmaster. He plays knight to f6. Now, normally when we get the Jobaba London, we start off with bishop to f4, and against some lines white will then go knight f3, e3 and knight d2, and against some other lines, mainly g6 lines, white will develop with knight to c3. However, some players like to play knight to c3 straight away. In this case, the opening is called the Verisov gambit, because against d5, which is the best move against knight to c3, there is a gambit that goes with e4, very dangerous gambit. And there are some other very tricky lines that start off with bishop to g5. However, by playing bishop to f4, now we get the gambit, the system, the London Jobaba, which is just like the London, but playing more aggressively, knight c3, and in many lines going for some sort of kingside initiative. So, Goganov, I seem to remember that Sokolov played a6 in our previous video, or c6, one of the two. But Goganov allows white to play knight to b5, hitting the c7 pawn, because he isn't afraid of playing knight to a6 and then pushing back the knights with c6. This is a very sensible way to play. It's actually the way I play when I get to play against this system. Note that bishop to b4 check, c3 and bishop to a5 is another interesting way of defending the c7 pawn. However, although the computer favors this line, it does misplace the bishop, and unless we're very good technically, we might end up having a bad bishop on the queen side, more or less shut in. So you have to be careful. You have to really know how to play chess to be able to do this sort of line. Knight to a6 is more simpler. We develop and we'll push back the knight. e3, bishop to e7, knight to f3 castle, and now h4, which as far as I saw with the computer in my database is the modern way of playing this variation. We're trying to get in bishop to d3, maybe knight to g5, launch some sort of attack on the king side. Sometimes the rook can enter the fray via h3, and sometimes if a bishop or a knight is on g5 and it's attacked by h6, we can even allow the piece to be captured because we're opening up the h file. Black plays c6, and now a very important move, queen to a5. Sokolov also played this move, and it's a key idea when the black bishop is outside the pawn chain because it can't drop back anymore to protect the pin. So by putting pressure on this pin, black is threatening knight to e4, and somehow black is trying to showcase the dangers of playing h4 and leaving the king in the center. White plays knight to d2, a very decent move, protecting against knight to e4, allowing the queen to develop if necessary on the king side, and also keeping knight to b3 handy. Now black goes for c5. This is the theoretical move. The knight has moved away from the center, so it makes sense to strike in the center. Now the computer here suggests both g4 and also h5. I actually think that g4 could be quite interesting, and I'm not totally sure what black was thinking of doing against g4. Maybe c takes d, and at some point bring the bishop to b4. This could be an idea. I'm even thinking that maybe, and only maybe, I have to double check this line. There could be a sacrifice here with e5, hitting the queen and hitting the bishop. I'd have to double check this line, but at first glance it seems okay, but I'm not totally sure. In any case, white played knight to b3, which according to the engine is slightly dubious. Of course, the idea is to swap on a6 and then capture the pawn on c5. But as we'll see, Goganov has this idea under control. He draws back with the queen, and when black swaps, he doesn't recapture the bishop because then knight takes c5 would indeed be good for white. But instead he plays the intermediate move c takes d4, hitting the knight, and therefore he's going to recover the piece without allowing that variation. Now, for example, if the bishop drops back, we play d takes c3, and now we go knight to e4, hitting the pawn on c3. If white captures the knight, very strong knight, we can follow up with rook to d8, maybe bishop to d7, bishop to c6, and with the two bishops and the weaknesses on the c file, I think black is doing very well here. So Sharikov played queen takes d4, and of course now Goganov played queen takes a6. Now this is the second key moment of the game. Again, it's a difficult position to understand. Ideas could be f3, putting these squares under control. Another idea could be long castle. But it seems to me that the move selected by Sharikov is not the best move. He played bishop to g5. I'm not totally sure what this move achieves because a capture here would just be directly bad. So it's not clear to me what he's trying to achieve with this move. maybe to prevent some sort of e5 happening, hitting the queen and the bishop. Who knows? Okay, so now b5 would be a very good move for black, initiating the queenside counterplay. But instead, Goganov plays h6. And now, white long castles, very aggressive. Now, as I explained before, in these situations with the rook on h1, you have to be very careful to capture a bishop here, because after pawn takes pawn, we might get the knight back. If the knight moves away, a very swift checkmate will occur with this mating pattern, and after f6 to escape, then we get the second mating pattern, cutting off the squares and delivering checkmate. These are mating patterns which everyone should know. Black played b5. He left the bishop in prise. a3 and rook to b8, threatening b4. Now the bishop drops back, hitting the rook. Not bad. Rook to b6. And now white went knight c5, hitting the queen. This in theory is good play by white. Bishop takes, queen takes, and bishop to b7, threatening rook to c8. Now, if I had to choose a side here, I'd probably take black. I have an extra pawn in the center, which is always very useful. But more importantly, it seems to me that rook to c8, maybe b4, it seems to me that my attack on the queen side is slightly faster than his attack on the king side. Of course, if he has time to get in g4 and g5, maybe even bishop to e5, then I'm in big trouble. But it seems to me that black's attack is slightly faster. Now I think queen to b4 now, rook to c8, rook to d4, preventing rook to c4, and rook b to c6. I do think white has the initiative here. He's on the attack. He might even be threatening some exchange sacrifices at some point with the knight to e4 to follow. But it's still a game. I think anything can still happen here. Instead, white played directly rook to d4, trying to anticipate this line. Rook to c8, and now he really had to drop back to b4. This was really the only move, and we transpose to the previous variation. Instead, he decided to play ambitiously with queen to e7. No doubt this was a blunder, and you'll see why. Rook to e8. If the queen drops back to b4, now e5 would win a piece. So he went to c7, hoping that rook to c6, he would have the drop back to e5. And things are unclear. He does threaten bishop to h6. He might have some chances here. But of course, black found a wonderful tactic that you can try your luck and see if you're able to spot how black is able to win the game straight away. If you see it, leave your answer down below in the comments. You spotted it? Of course. You play e5 with a double attack, and when bishop takes e5, you trap the queen because the queen no longer has the escape route. And here white decided to resign. I do think this is quite an interesting game. It highlights some of the ideas for both sides in this topical variation. And again, with this game from Goganov and our previous game by Sokolov, I do think you have enough weapons in your repertoire to face the Jobaba London with confidence and a good aggressive attitude. That's enough for me for today, and I hope that my next video will be live from Singapore, maybe with a preview or maybe with some analysis of the first game between Gukesh and Dingliren. I'm super excited to travel. My suitcase is getting ready over there, and tomorrow I'll be flying over, and hopefully my next time I'll contact you guys will be from there. Meanwhile, as always, enjoy the game, improve, try and get better, and have a lot of fun. Hey guys, and welcome to another analysis video on my channel. Today on the agenda we have an interesting miniature game between Oskar Bjarnason from Iceland, a 21-15 player, strong club player, and Ivan Sokolov, a grandmaster from Netherlands, 25-89. Of course, Ivan is very well known in the chess world, not only as an excellent player in the latter part of his career by now. He's played against most of the world champions. He has excellent score against Kasparov and other excellent players. Now he focuses more on training, but is still a very dangerous player, as we'll see in the game. If you need a good alternative against the Hobaba London system, this game will be of interest to you. So this game is played in the EECC European Chess Club Cup in Serbia, in Banja Vranja in Serbia, which is being held these days. A very important tournament with the best teams of Europe fielding some of the best players, both in women and open category. And as you know, when you're seeing this video, I'll be traveling, so I've left these videos as a way to keep in contact with you while I'm outside my home. And I hope you enjoy the video and learn a bit more against the London Jobaba variation. So Bjarnason, playing for the Bonhage Gambit Club, opens with d4, and Sokolov plays knight f6. Sokolov is representing the Super Chess Club, and a fun fact, he wasn't originally one of the players. He is more the manager or the captain of the team. However, due to the last-minute suspension of Kirill Savchenko, you've probably heard about this, most of you, who was arguably caught cheating in Spain and banned 75 days by FIDE while they're considering the allegations and the evidence and the proof. So Shevchenko was going to play the cup, and as he couldn't play, Sokolov jumped in and occupied his seat in the team. So knight c3 is one of the moves of the Hobaba London variation. The threat is to play e4. It's also sometimes known as the Veresov variation, with knight to c3 first. If white plays bishop to f4 first, then after knight c3 it is the Jobaba London variation. With knight c3, e4 is threatened. Of course, if I'm a French player, I can go e6 and d5, which will be fantastic. If I'm a Perk player, I can go d6 and now g6. I can go e5. I want to go to the Philidor variation. Lots of different opening ideas, choices. But most players, if they're a Sicilian player, for example, like Sokolov is, or an e4, e5 player, they go d5 here, stopping once and for all the move e4. Now, as you all probably know, because you're aspiring club players who watch the higher level content I offer on my channel, most of you probably know that in Queen's Gambit type positions, the knight on c3 is oddly placed. It's not a very good position for the knight, because after a c6 or an a6, the movement of the knight will be severely reduced. Also, we normally play Queen's Gambit with c4, and the idea behind the c4 Queen's Gambit and the knight behind the c4 pawn is to put pressure on d5, and also in some positions divert the queen to b3 or sometimes c2. So by playing knight c3, we're reducing our options. However, Jobaba and other players decided that this would be a reasonable way of playing, and not going for the idea c4, but keeping the pawn on c2, maybe long castling, and in many variations launching attacks on the king side. A very ambitious and enterprising way to play. Now, there are many moves here. I personally have a slight fondness for c6. I do enjoy putting these three pawns against the knight, something that I've always enjoyed doing. But Sokolov plays a6, which is very interesting. Not only does it prevent knight to b5, just in case white was thinking of doing that, but it also does have the idea of playing b5, as we will see on the second move. And when you play b5, already you're gaining some space on the queen side and sort of showing your hand if white decides to go with long castling. White plays a3, which is reasonable. e6, very solid. Now, a lot of players go with moves like bishop at f5 in these positions. I've learned myself through many blitz games that the bishop on f5 sometimes in these positions is harassed by the pawns. So I don't generally develop it anytime to f5. Sokolov is a very strong grandmaster. He knows this. He plays e6. And now Bjarnason goes for g4, which is the typical way of playing this variation, albeit quite risky. c5, excellent, counterattack in the center. And here comes the first mistake by Bjarnason. Not a big mistake, but of course, something that he shouldn't have done. He played d takes c5. I have no doubt that in some variations, this move is okay, and maybe that's where the confusion comes. But you can't just release the center this way and also allow black to develop. I'm sure that for another game, Bjarnason will go g5, and after an exchange of pawns and knight to e4, this sort of position is much more playful for both players. I still think black is doing very well, but the game is open. After d takes c5, bishop takes c5, g5, knight to d7, I do think black has easy development and is prepared to attack in the center or on the queen side, depending what white does. So I already think black is slightly better here. Queen to h5, an aggressive move to long castle. And the second mistake, in my opinion, is to long castle here. Black is just too advanced on the queen side, already has some threats. White has moved his pawn to a3, which means there's a lever on b4 where black can open up files. This is just a mistake. Better would have been knight to f3, then bishop to g2, short castle, and of course black is okay, probably even better, but it's a game. So white played castle, b4, take, already threatening bishop to c3, bishop to g2. Of course, black could have played already bishop takes and queen a5. This would have been perfectly fine. But Sokolov prefers to play queen to a5 first. And maybe already in his mind, he was seeing such things as e5, rook to b8, maybe knight to b6, c4. And he probably thought that swapping off the knight was just leaving himself without some of the options he might have in the position. And I think it was a good idea, because after knight g to e2, here is one of the ways we can easily go wrong in this position. So Sokolov played knight d to e5, a fantastic move. The idea is to jump to c4, control the d2 square, and go for a final attack. Fantastic move. However, one could easily go wrong here by playing queen to a1 check and knocking off the b2 pawn. But look what would have happened. Rook to b1, queen to a3, and rook to a1. Now, to avoid a perpetual, we have to play bishop takes knight check and drop back. But now the king will hide on f1, and although black is a pawn up and obviously doing very well, again, we haven't finished off our opponent. It's a clear advantage, but we haven't finished him off. And this is something we have to avoid when we have very good positions. We can't go for a second best move. We have to crush. So Sokolov goes for the crushing move. Knight to e5, king to b1, and now capture on c3 and rook b8. And already he's threatening. Queen takes c3, knight to c4. He could also be threatening rook takes b2 check straight away. And also queen to a3. So many threats. Impossible to save all of these threats at the same time. So white goes for a trick. Knight takes d5. And here, a very nice variation could have been played. Of course, Sokolov just played e takes d5 and carried on with this plan. But he had a very nice move here, which is rook takes b2. King takes b2 and knight to c4 check. I'm sure Ivan calculated this line, but either preferred the other one and that's it, or noticed some complexity in this line and decided not to risk it. For example, here, king c1, queen a1 is very easy to calculate. But king to b1, this is also very easy, but maybe king to b3, hitting the knight, and now e takes d5, the computer is giving a win, but maybe he saw in his calculations something like rook takes pawn, check, here. Maybe he noticed that there must be a win here, but there's really no point into going into this position if you don't have a forced mate. So Ivan just recaptured the knight, and now played a very strong move based on calculation, queen to c3. Now the threat is queen to b2, and it's very difficult to find a defense here. Of course, one of the big problems is that the bishop is coming to f5, which will be the move we will play against any b3 move. That's already basically dead lost. White tried the last trick. He took on c6 to try and deviate the knight here, but king e7 was very precise, again threatening to mate on b2, b3, and here a lovely finish. Rook takes b3, c takes b3, and now if king c1, we check, we bring in the bishop with check, and thanks to our king e7, we get the rook in with a checkmate on the next move. Whereas king a1, as played in the game, check, check, and with white blocks here, then check, and Bjarnason resigned. The mate is with queen b2. Notice all of this again, as we saw in a game which we recently published on the channel, the queen on h5, totally offside, out of play, and the way Sokolov flows with this attack is quite impressive. So a very interesting way to play against the Jobaba London system with a6 and b5, and then finish off development. And if white goes queenside, which is very typical, he's in for a shock if we're able to play as good as Ivan can play. I hope you enjoyed the game. We'll see you when I get back from my small vacation travel with more videos. And meanwhile, keep enjoying the games published every day on the internet. Keep enjoying the chess content. World Championship coming up very soon. And if you aren't a subscriber of the channel, I would really appreciate that you hit that subscribe button and help me grow the channel. Spread the word to your friends. I'm sure many of them can enjoy learning some improvement from these videos. Have fun and enjoy. Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the channel, another chess analysis video. On the agenda this afternoon, we're going to be looking at a game between top grandmasters Tigran Petrosian from Armenia. He's rated 2551. He's playing with the white pieces, and with the black pieces we have Alexander Grischuk, elite grandmaster from Russia, rated rapid 2689. Now, of course, most of you will be surprised to see that there's a player called Tigran Petrosian. It's the same name as the famous world champion. I do think that his parents named him after the world champion, but in Armenia, Petrosian is a very well-known name. I've actually played against a Tigran Petrosian, not this one, another one who was rated about 2300 a few years back in the French team championship. So yeah, Tigran's a very good blitz player, very, very good. This is a rapid game, and Grischuk is well known to be one of the best rapid players in the world, also very good at blitz. So we're in for a good game here. This is the 6th round. Petrosian with white, Grischuk with the black pieces. Let's check the game from the World Rapid Championship in 2024 in New York in December. Okay, so Petrosian opened with c4, the English opening, and Grischuk for this game decided to play pawn to c6, which is a move a lot of people use to play the Slav defense. So after d4, no doubt that Grischuk is going to play d5, and we have here the Slav, or maybe the semi-Slav, depending on what variation black decides to play. but it's the Slav. However, with this move order c6, black has to be prepared against e4, d5, and this would be the Caro-Kann defense. So Grischuk obviously is well versed in both openings, and generally speaking, a lot of players have the Caro-Kann and the Slav as a double solid black repertoire, a schematic repertoire, actually quite good for rapid games, because you can play the opening quite fast because it's difficult to be surprised in the opening in the Slav or the Caro-Kann. So actually it's a good recommendation for those of you who like to play similar structures with a solid defense, Caro-Kann and Slav, the double. Okay, so Petrosian plays knight to f3, d5, and instead of going for d4, which would be the main line, he plays e3, which is a variation. Some people call this the Keimer variation after the German wonder kid, Vincent Keimer. The idea is just to play with b3, bishop to e2, bishop to b2, and then postpone to the late opening ideas such as d4 and castle, or some aggressive plans with queen to c2, rook g1 and g4. And lots of these ideas have been seen in this variation. Grischuk plays knight to f6, b3, and bishop to f5. Now, for those of you who play the London system with white, you can see that black is actually playing the London system with reverse colors. Imagine black has played with white, reverse colors, d4, knight to f3, bishop to f4, e3 and c3. This is the London system with reverse colors, with a tempi less. But in fact, black is playing as if black was white, half a tempi or a full tempi down. Now, if white doesn't play anything very aggressive, then black will finish the opening quite comfortably. Nowadays, both Petrosian and Grischuk, they're both around 40. They're not really playing mainstream theory. They're just trying to get a game. So probably both of them are okay with this type of opening. Now, what really is remarkable in this variation, h6 is always very good in the London system to be able to drop back with the bishop against knight to h4. Now, as I was saying, what is remarkable in this variation is this moment here. This moment here, I thought it was very, very instructive, very interesting. Now, if we were playing this as the London with white, most of us would go castle here. We just put our king into safety, and then maybe queen to e7, and with white in the London, sometimes we're trying to play e4, and that would be e5 here with black. So queen to e7, rook to e8, maybe rook to a d8, and go from here. And I think black has a very nice and equal, stable position. But Grischuk does something very interesting, which I've never seen with white. Maybe I should study a bit more of the London. But from now on, if I play the London with white, or I play against the London system with black, I do have this in my repertoire as black, I'm going to play like Grischuk does. He doesn't castle. He plays queen to e7, just developing. And now, when Petrosian tries to expand on the queen side, he still doesn't castle, and he plays knight to e4. So when I saw this, at first I just thought, I mean, he'll castle at any moment, the center is closed, there's no rush to castle. But then subsequently in the game, we see that the fact that he hasn't castles gives him some extra opportunities. So I think this is very interesting. And if you're medium strength to higher strength players, you should really bring this into your repertoire. If you're lower rated players, maybe it's best just to castle and go from there. But medium high rated players, look what Grischuk does. Now, of course, white could have swapped knights. Probably Grischuk would have taken with the pawn to unbalance. And this is a very interesting position to play. with options for both sides. But Petrosian continues to play on the queen side with b4. Now, a6 is always a very good move to control a bit the position. Now, if white goes b5, he has to take into account that he might lose the a3 pawn. So a6 is okay. Now I was thinking that maybe the best option for white would have been to play c5 here, hitting the bishop. And now either you drop back to c7, but if you want to go back to b8 to allow for a queen to c7 option later on, you are blocking in the rook. So if white wants to play c5, he should really do it now before black gets the chance to play rook d8. Tigran didn't notice that or thought it wasn't the best move. He played rook to c1, which is an okay move, but maybe not the best one in the position. And of course, Grischuk, who's very good, again delays castling and plays rook to d8, not only putting the rook x-ray in front of the queen, you never know when the position could open up, but also, more importantly, if white goes c5 now, he can drop back to b8, which will allow him the extra possibility of queen to c7 later on, if need be. So after rook d8, white played knight to d2, trying to put a bit of pressure, maybe do some simplifications, but Grischuk brings the other knight to here to f6. And now I was thinking that probably here already white should be thinking of exchanging pieces. Maybe knight to e4, knight to e4, knight to e4, bishop takes e4, maybe even bishop takes d3. And I have to think that this type of position, after pawn takes pawn and castle, maybe later e5, this should be a draw. I can hardly say that black is better in this type of position. Now, if Grischuk wants to play more ambitiously, after the first exchange, he could take with the pawn. It's difficult to say if he would decide for this or go for the other route. Both options are possible. If you go for the other route, mass exchanges, probably a draw. If you go for this route, then you unbalance the position and there's risk for both sides. But Petrosian, after going back with the knight, decides to return, already showing some, I don't know, some sort of psychological weakness maybe. And Grischuk pounces on and plays knight to g4. Already, you know, hitting the pawns on f2 and h2. And against h3, here is where we can see, by delaying the castling, Grischuk gets in this extra opportunity. Instead of retreating with the knight, he goes pawn to h5. Fantastic play. Now the king is relatively safe in the center. Could even go to f8 if need be. But he has quite a strong center here. And this reminds me a lot when we play the London with white. These knight to g5, h4, allowing your knight to be captured. Those of you who play the London, I'm sure you sort of notice these plans. He's doing it with black, and it's very dangerous. For example, let's say white captures the knight. Now we recapture, hitting the knight on f3, but also if the knight moves, the queen will be coming to do checkmate. Knight to e4, queen to h4, and as all of you know, this will be mate. In this case, with the knight on e4, he can't even escape. But even if the knight wasn't on e4 and he went f3 to get an escape route, we just shut in the king with g3. This is very standard. Alternatively, if white starts trading off pieces with knight takes e4, we play pawn takes, knight to d2, and now bishop to b8, preparing queen to c7, and at the end of the variation, this could be mate. Again, if the knight is captured, we can do various things. Pawn takes pawn is also winning, but sticking in this check is very good because it allows us to bring the pieces over with tempi, and here we close down the king side and do mate. So the knight can't be captured, and as the knight can't be captured, this is already very dangerous because black can play bishop to b8 and queen to c7, or sometimes even rook to h6 and rook to g6. So this is already quite dangerous for white. Petrosian plays queen to e1. maybe just trying to put a bit of defense here, possibly trying for this, but already queen to e1 is a very, very bad sign that things are not going well for you. At some point, if a queen lands on h4 and the knight has moved to e5, f3 would swap the exchange of queens, but it's already very, very difficult. Bishop to b8, a very good move. Now white decides to exchange knights. Pawn takes. Knight to e5. A good move, blocking off the bishop on b8, but the queen goes through another route. So now the queen has passed to the king side. f6 could be a threat at some point. If the knight goes back, the pawn will capture the knight, so nothing going there. And here, if the knight is taken, we just recapture, and again the queen goes to the h-file with a winning position. Now the computer gives one line which sort of holds, and as it's very instructive, I'm going to show it to you. And also, it's a line which will give us awareness on defensive procedures. Check this one out. The best line, according to the computer, is to play king to h1, f6, and now f4. Okay, up to here, not so difficult to spot. The queen should go back to h6. And just now we capture the knight and we blast the position open with d5. Now, you might be thinking, Michael, this is completely ridiculous. I mean, the queen, the rook, the bishop, white is going to be dead here. But check this out. If mistakenly black captures an h3, white has a very interesting defensive resource that all of you should know how to use. This would be in my 100 defensive resources that you have to know. This one would be in here. We go g4 and we use our opponent's pawn as a barrier to hide our king behind. Now this is a very interesting resource, and in fact in this position the engine gives white with the advantage because there's no longer a direct attack, the file is blocked off, and white has the initiative in the center. So this is a very interesting resource. Obviously Grischuk would have noticed this and would not have played pawn takes pawn. Probably he would have kept looking for the initiative with g5, but no doubt this was the best chance for Tigran Petrosian to save the game. But in rapid chess, it's not so easy to spot these resources because you're under pressure on time. And he played g3. And now knight takes e5 and bishop takes h3. Black is winning the exchange. The game is over. However, after queen to c3, instead of capturing the rook, which was perfectly correct and probably the move that I would have done, Grischuk understands that this is not a time to capture material, but to push on with the attack. And he plays h4, and now white is completely busted. In fact, white resigned in this position on move 21, giving us a lovely miniature game. But I mean, pawn takes pawn, followed by queen takes g3 and mate. There's no good way to stop this. The only way I found to stop this is to play g4. And again, bishop takes rook is winning. But I think that Grischuk would have played bishop takes g4, queen takes g4, and I'm pretty sure that he would have gone for rook to h5 here, trying to get the rook into the game, trying to hit the pawn on e5. This is going to be over very, very, very soon. So, a very, very good game by Grischuk. What have we learned in this game? Apart from enjoying a nice attacking game, we've learned some ideas in the London system using reversed colours. Reverse colours, London system, which can be used against the English opening, as you've seen, or against the Reti opening. Both, we can use this London system with reverse colours. Also, very interesting, notice how Grischuk delayed castling enough time to be able to introduce this knight to g4 and h5 attacking idea. So this is something to be wary about, maybe to remember, and just put it in our repertoire as an idea that can be used in some situations. Then there's some tactical accuracy in calculation, obviously. That's why these are top players. But from an opening standpoint, I think there's quite a few useful things we've learned in this game. At least I've learned them, and I'm throwing them over to you so you can learn a bit more about chess, opening play, and in this case, playing with black. I hope you enjoyed. Have fun out there. Remember, it's cold here in Barcelona, but the weather will get better. And yeah, leave a comment below and tell me where you're signing in from. Which is your country? I'd like to know where my audience is signing in from around the world. So if you enjoyed, to leave a comment below, I'd really appreciate it. Have fun and see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my channel, another analysis video of a miniature chess game. On the agenda today, we have a game. We're going to take a look at a game from the recent 2024 Rapid World Championship between Grandmaster Maxim Dlugy, playing with white pieces. Maxim is a very strong USA Grandmaster, formerly from the Soviet Union, currently rated 25-14. He is on the old side, so he's a veteran by now, but a very, very good and fast rapid and blitz player. With the black pieces, we have Uganda's top chess player, Harold Wanyama, a FIDE master, currently rated 25-54. Remember, to become a FIDE master, you either have to win certain national and zonal championships, which is very difficult, or cross 2300 FIDE rating, which is also extremely difficult. So we're talking about players up in the 2 to 3% percentile best players in the world. Don't be fooled by his 2154 rating. He is a very strong player. Of course, a grandmaster such as Dlugy is obviously already in the 0.5 percentile of the world's best players. And in this game, we're going to take another look once more at the London system. And more specifically, in this game, if you are a London system player or you want to put it in your repertoire, this is a very important game to study. I would definitely add this game to any collection of London system model games to show to your students or to learn by yourself. Let's take a look at the game. So Maxim opens with d4 and plays bishop to f4, which is the modern way of playing the London, delaying knight to f3, because in some instances, in some circumstances, we will play f4 before playing knight to f3 further on in the game. More importantly, against certain variations with g6, we might go to knight c3. There are some subtleties, although most of the times, as in this game, knight to f3 and bishop to f4, they end up transposing. But there are some interesting subtleties. For example, I seem to remember that in the line with c5 and some very quick queen b6s, in this line, it was generally more important to have your knight on d2 than having your knight on f3. For example, to avoid certain traps like bishop to f5, while when you're taking here, you're losing on b2 and a1. So there are certain subtleties which in certain lines, having the knight on d2 is better than having the knight on f3 earlier on in the opening move order. So bishop to f4 is basically taken over knight to f3, but both are perfectly playable. In this game, Wanyama goes for e6, which is the solid approach. He doesn't really want to bring his bishop out to these squares, so he just plays e6 and gives priority to the development of the queen side the king side, his king side position. This is actually the line that I play. It's one of the two lines I play when I'm facing the London. And it's one of the lines I teach most of my students because it is quite solid and it's a very easy way to finish your development. But one of the differences after knight to d2, c5, c3, I teach my students the move bishop to d6, opposing the bishop on f4. Whereas in the game, Wanyama played first knight to c6. It may seem similar, but I can assure you it isn't. There's an important detail that we're going to see in the game, which makes knight to c6 perfectly playable, but not in conjunction with the move bishop to d6. And let me explain. So after bishop to d6, white generally drops back to g3, we castle, and white plays knight g to f3. This is the main line. Now black shouldn't take on g3 until white has castled, because if we take prematurely, then white gets this open file with the bishop on d3. It's very clear that this is dangerous. So after knight g to f3, I generally play queen to c7, a developing move, bishop to d3, and now I play knight b d7. I don't play knight to c6 here, because in this case, white can take on c5 and we can't take back with the bishop because our queen is hanging. So I play knight b to d7, and actually in one game in France, I faced pawn takes pawn here, but I can capture with the knight or with the queen, so it's all okay. After castle, now I swap on g3 and I play e5. And I've played this position before, and also some of my students. And here both queen to e7 and queen to h5 promise black a very safe and comfortable game. There are some other lines for white obviously in this position, but this is a very safe and good approach against the London. Bishop to d6, castle, queen to c7, and above all, knight b to d7. Now when you play knight to c6, you can still try and get to this position. But now, if you go queen to c7, which would be the corresponding move, then you might get hit by pawn takes pawn. So Wanyama plays b6, which is also perfectly okay. He wants to go bishop to b7 and maybe later on play this move here. But of course now queen to e2, bishop to b7. Notice how Dlugy very intelligently doesn't play castle. He's still waiting for black maybe to swap here and take with the pawn. And also, while these two bishops are being attacked, the queen doesn't have so much movement because we can't drop the bishop. Also notice that with this setup by black, e5 is hardly possible. We would need to put the queen on e7 or c7, and then maybe white will exchange on d6 and effectively win a tempo. So although white could castle now, Dlugy takes his time to play rook to d1, which is a very interesting move. Doesn't seem to be doing much, but it is actually doing quite a bit. Now queen to c7, and now he plays e4. And this is very strong because now he's threatening e5, winning a piece. So the computer here, the engine, gives the next move for black. A very difficult move to make. Wanyama played pawn takes pawn, which is generally the move you're going to do in this position, but this lands him already in a weaker position, actually a bad position. The computer suggests knight to h5. Not at all an easy move to do. And here there are several ways to proceed, but bishop takes d6, followed by e5, and now just queen to e3 sort of highlights the bad position of the knight on h5. And if you're looking at this with black, you hardly will go into this position. You have a black knight stranded on h5, the bishop on b7 is blocked in by your pawns, my bishop on d3 is very strong. You don't really want to go into this position. However, the engine said that if now I play f5, black can hold this position. Okay, I still think this is better for white, and he has more options and possibilities. In any case, the computer evaluation is only slightly worse for black, so this could be possible. I actually would just suggest to go for the line with knight to d7 and not play knight to c6. In any case, e4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight takes, queen takes, hitting h7, g6, and now here comes the key move of the line. We're going to take advantage of all these tactical threats, but also the pin on b7. We play pawn takes pawn. Now, the bishop can't recapture because of the queen on c7, so he has to catch up with the book. And now take, and boom! Now we see why the rook on d1 was there for a reason. Instead of playing castling, white has used the tempo for the castle to do the other moves. And with the rook on d1, he's actually trying to win a piece now. So Wanyama found queen to c7 protecting the bishop, but now this pin is very, very annoying, and actually quite hard to resolve favorably. So knight to e5 hits the knight, black needs to protect, and finally castle. Of course, now black has to be very careful. I mean, rook to d7 is already a very serious threat. I was wondering why white couldn't play rook to d7 straight away, which he actually can, but I suspect there may be some tactics here related to the king in the center. Maybe queen takes b2. It says here queen to b5. This also might be reasonable, yes, to provoke c4 first, and then maybe check and highlight the king in the center. So rook to d7 wouldn't win a piece yet, but castle now actually threatens rook to d7. Black plays rook d8, but notice that the pin is still there and it's not easy to unpin. So white takes advantage to play h4 with the idea of playing h5 and possibly h6 and creating some mating threats on the king side. Now again, the engine suggests that the best defense here would be to swap rooks and propose another rook swap. I've calculated this position, and I think that white has the edge in the endgame. Maybe a very strong endgame player could hold this to a draw, but it's still going to be difficult. The knight is very strong on e5. The king can't come to the center because we'll lose the pawn on f7. And if black plays f6, we jump to d7, hitting many pawns. And meanwhile, white's king is going to go to c4 with a better pawn structure. Even b4 would immediately create an outside passed pawn for white. So this is a difficult ending to defend. Wanyama played knight to a5, proposing the exchange of queens, but without conceding the rook, the file, which I think is good. But of course, here Dlugy doesn't exchange queens. He plays queen to f4, still hitting the pawn on f7, so that the black queen doesn't have a mobility, but also with the idea of pushing h5, h6 and queen to f6. Black came back, proposing a move repetition, and Dlugy pinned again, but now from f3 instead of f4, e4, which is better because we not only defend the rook, but also we're hitting the pawn on f7. So this is actually an improvement. Again, rook takes, rook d8, but now I think Dlugy would have played rook to e1, keeping the pin and forcing black to go passively again. The computer suggests h5, trying to stop my own h5. Rook f e1, with the idea that against queen c7, for example, we play take, queen to f6, with the idea rook to d7, rook d1 and rook d7. As you can see, black is having a lot of trouble. Also, there are some sacrifices of the knight for all of these four pawns. Black is busted here. So black goes for knight a5 again, trying to exchange queens, queen to f6, and now rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and rook to f8, but now rook to d7, fantastic move, queen takes b2, and knight to f7 and mates. So this was how the game ended. Wanyama actually resigned after rook d7, keeping the game under the 25 move limit for their miniature feature. And as you can see, I definitely suggest analysing this game again if you are a London player, because I do think it has a lot of the ideas, both strategic and tactical ideas, that make the London a perfectly playable system with white. So I do hope you've enjoyed. As always, leave a comment below if you want to. I'm checking every day all the comments and answering interesting questions if they appear. And as always, have fun. We'll see each other on the boards. I do hope you improve your chess and get to know these players through these videos. See you in the next video.